the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Hello, and welcome to another new episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Today, I am so excited to sit down with my friend and someone that I look to for social media expertise, Nina Stoller-Lindsay. She's a social media strategist and a coach for mission-driven businesses, and we talk about everything from stress-free social strategy to how to address or prevent burnout in your social media use. And how to have some great social media boundaries. I just know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Nina as much as we did. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I'm so excited to sit down today with Nina Stoller-Lindsay. She's someone who I look to for inspiration on social media and how to strategize and navigate burnout and prevent and avoid stress to the extent possible. And I'm just so excited for our conversation today. I feel like, Nina, you've got so many awesome tips that I'm sure our listeners will appreciate.
Well, thanks for having me, Liz. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I love it. Well, and I'm just thinking back, I love you and I met during a content sprint. Gosh, maybe a year ago now?
Yeah, I think almost a year ago.
I love it. And it makes me so happy that here we are today.
Yes.
I remember,
I'm glad to be joining you and glad to be one of your women changing the world.
well, yeah, the feeling is so mutual. I remember when you first told me what you did, you're like, I do social media for good or for social impact. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. We should chat. Um,
Definitely.
Yeah, well, so I would love for people who are listening who don't already know you and your amazingness, would you mind giving just a quick introduction?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a social media strategist and coach, and I focus on working with mission driven brands as well as one on one with socially conscious solopreneurs. And I am all about helping you build stress free social media strategies that can help you drive sales as well as social good, because like you, I am a big believer in the importance of supporting social good, but we also need to make money for ourselves and to be able to give back to good causes. And I believe that with the right social media strategy, you can absolutely do both and save yourself a lot of stress in the process.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I am here for less stress on social. And I have
Aren't
to
we
ask,
all?
right? um, so my favorite question to kind of kick off Women Changing the World podcast episodes is to ask if you could change one thing about the world. I know this is such a big question. It's the North Star question. But if you could only change one thing, what would you want to change about the world?
I always come back to climate change and the future of the planet with that question. And like you said, I mean, there's so many things to change. There's so many causes I care about. I think, since I was in high school, the climate change issue is certainly one that gives me the most existential anxiety, because it's sort of like, well, what happens if the planet ends? Not to, I guess we're getting real dark here at the beginning, but I think, that issue is scary and pervasive. And, there are so many other important issues, but it feels like if we don't have a planet to live on, we're not even going to have a chance to fix the other issues. And I think that, they're all connected, even if we think about, anti-racism and women's rights and supporting indigenous communities, climate, the effects of negative effects of climate change, disproportionately affect people who, are already marginalized in various ways. So, it's all very interconnected with a lot of the other. I'm not an expert on this, but it is very interconnected with, other social justice issues. Intersectional Environmentalist by Leah Thomas is a great resource on sort of that interconnection if anyone is interested.
Totally. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And having worked in this space for a while, yes, they are all so interconnected. And I also feel like the existential climate anxiety support group is something that so many of us could use these days. So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
I think we're at the point where we're gonna have to have therapists who like specialize in climate change anxiety. I'm not kidding.
That's a brilliant idea. I mean, I do not disagree with you. And also, like, whew, that's a lot to hold. It's a
Yeah,
lot to
yes it
hold.
is. Yes it is.
Changing gears a little bit, but I know it's all related. Um, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about like what exactly your kind of like what your day to day looks like. Like, what are all the things that are currently on your plate, and what's the best part of doing what you do?
Well, that's a good question. All the things, I mean, like any other solopreneur, right? I am doing it all. So I have the work that I do with clients, and then there is the marketing of the work, which for me is actually kind of fun because that's my background, and I was actually a journalist before I was a social media and content marketer. So I like the marketing piece because it is really a chance to share my own voice and my perspectives, and create content in my own voice in a way that I couldn't do when I was, leading social media in-house for brands. And, then there's a lot of admin, and then there's, connecting with other entrepreneurs like you and guest coaching for their communities. And yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes back to day-to-day support of my clients, whether, I am building a custom social media strategy for a sustainability focused nonprofit that needs to, invite in a younger generation of donors, or working one on one with a solopreneur to, help them find their voice online and share their mission through social media. And I think, that really is one of my favorite parts, when I get to work with other small business owners who have so much to say and truly are experts, but are often afraid to call themselves experts, and are often afraid to share their personal story and what lights them up, and why they care about the causes and the mission that they care about. Really empowering them to do that and have a voice, and see how it has ripple effects in terms of how their community shows up and engages with them, and the, opportunities that it invites in for them is, I think the most rewarding part for me.
Totally, totally. I feel like that part must be so fun. I know through my own work, it's like it's so fun to watch, given what I do, like women especially, but people really like own their thought leadership and own their corners of the internet. And like, I mean, I know firsthand how scary it is to put yourself out there in that
It
way,
is
but then like
scary.
and it like doesn't, I mean, I guess it does. I guess the scary part changes, but then I'm also like partially it also like doesn't stop being like what the part that's scary changes, but I feel like there's always a scary part.
It gets less scary, but then there's sort of a new level of putting yourself out there, in a new level, a bigger audience that you want to reach, or a bigger claim, or a bigger idea that you want to share, and then that's scary.
Totally, totally. The scary part changes, but it sticks around. Well, that's so awesome. And I also feel like there's a number of people who've been on the podcast who are former journalists. I was a journalist too. And I feel like it's like, oh, in a different world, we'd all be journalists today, but instead here we are. Um, I would love to hear like your full story of how you came to be where you are today, as a solopreneur. helping small businesses own their social media voice and presence. Like, how does someone get here? I was just gonna say, really, the invitation too is like take up space and tell your story. Like, we want the long version.
Yeah, I will give you the long version. Well, I mean, it was definitely a bit of a circuitous path, but it kind of all makes sense to me in retrospect. And I think about that a lot with my clients when we're building out how are you going to tell your personal story on social media, in a way that will help your audience relate to you and build trust. And they often feel like, oh, the fact that I started a Save the Whales Club in elementary school isn't really relevant, is it? And I said, well, I don't know. You're a marketer for nonprofits now. So I think it's still relevant that you've been doing this kind of work since you were a child. But anyway, I digress. So, yeah, I mean, my earliest part of my career, I was an aspiring modern dancer and choreographer. I grew up in New York. I went to performing arts high school. I was very serious about dance my whole life, and I pretty quickly burnt out on the challenges of starving artist life, but still wanted to be really invested in the arts. So I transitioned to freelance arts and culture journalism, which was marginally less torturous. And I had what I think to a lot of people who didn't know me that well, this very glamorous career. I was writing for publications like Time Out New York and New York Magazine. I even got a byline at The Atlantic. I was covering red carpets and openings of Broadway shows and interviewing all sorts of celebrities. One of my favorite interviews I did was with the actress Laverne Cox about the first clothing purchase she ever made herself, and it actually had to do a lot with her transition into cross dressing, and that was really interesting. I interviewed Ivanka Trump twice, actually. This was
Really?
but way before her father decided to run for president. This was when she was still ostensibly a Democrat, so different time. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was really excited in all those ways, but I was totally drained because I was, covering events where it would take like 12 hours of work and I get paid $75.
Mm.
So, between just needing more financial stability, really wanting to be part of a team, and then also being interested more in like the strategy behind the written word. Like, we create this beautiful content, but like, how do we actually ensure that it reaches people and reaches more people? And how do we create content that gets people to take action? Between all of those interests, I decided to transition into social media and content marketing. I actually turned down what was really a dream editorial job at Condé Nast
Oh,
to
wow.
work. Yeah. And I'm glad I did, to work at a mission driven startup. So yeah, then I was at four different startups that were all pretty mission driven in some way, either focused on financial literacy or helping families get outside to reap the benefits of nature. And it was also exciting and also a lot of burnout because, in each of those roles, I was pretty much the first dedicated social media hire. I grew all those social media strategies completely from the ground up, while in true startup fashion, also managing email marketing and a blog and paid media
Mhm.
and PR. Basically, they were like, you're a writer. This has words in it. Can you
Yeah.
can you do this?
You're just in charge of all the things that involve words. No big deal. Totally just one person's job.
Yeah, actually we like our marketing team at one of the companies was like very male, which is pretty unusual, and we affectionately called the marketing team bro, and they used to say Nina does everything. Nina does everything. Um so yeah, I mean, I learned so much really quickly that enabled me to do what I do now, but I also got pretty burnt out, and at the end of that, I felt like I had developed a pretty toxic relationship with social media where I just didn't, I was like scrolling all the time because I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. And I was just putting so much pressure on myself for my content to perform a certain way. And I'd been having all these negative thoughts about social media for a long time, in addition, on a personal level, in addition to like everything we read in the news. And I remember saying to my best friend who actually works in social impact, like, I should just change careers. I just wish social media would like go away completely. And she said to me, Nina, I get that, but it's not going anywhere. And you're someone who actually has the tools and perspective to use it for good. So that's kind of what I decided I was going to do. I really wanted to, because I'd worked for these mission driven organizations, and especially, in the last couple of years where we've seen so much more, especially post Black Lives Matter, so much more activism happening on social media. I really did become convinced that social media is a crucial tool for, raising awareness and inspiring action around important causes. I also know if you are a small business owner, you don't have to be on social media, but it is a really important way to grow your business. Um, so I wanted to help people use it for business growth and for good, but without the mental health downsides. Sometimes for many of us, or seem unavoidable when we're on these platforms, but there are things that we can do to control that. And as I say, make impact on social media without the stress.
Have you been meaning to expand the circle of amazing women in your network, but it's been hard to find the time to connect consistently? Are you a member of a small team creating a big impact and you wish you had additional brains to tap to think strategically about what's next? Are you craving personal growth, community, and magic in your personal and professional life, but feeling like you don't know where to find it? Imagine if you had dedicated time and space to build relationships with other badass women in impact. Imagine if you had access to a brain trust of rock stars who are ready to help you solve any challenge, personal or professional. Imagine if you had an extended team of like minded women cheering you on, hyping you up, opening doors, and helping you make your wildest dreams come true. Imagine if you took the time to really invest in yourself and be intentional about the impact you are here to make. The Girls Club Mastermind is a 5-month mastermind for women who are changing the world. It is an intimate community of powerful women who are dedicated to lifting each other up. They are your hype women, your cheerleaders, and your extended team. The next round of the Girls Club Mastermind kicks off in April, and you don't want to miss it. Head to elizabethbest.com/girlsclub. That's ELISABETHBEST.com/girlsclub to learn more and apply today. Uh,
That
I
is my long and winding story of how I got to where I am today.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I feel like I can only imagine the self-trust and the leap of faith it took to turn down the dream job and pivot into content. And I also think that that's so cool and so interesting that you went from wishing social media would go away to figuring out how to help people navigate social media without that feeling of wishing it would go away.
Yeah, I mean, I really, Diana Davis, who is my first business coach, she, I guest coached for her course recently, and she said to her clients, she basically described it as Nina was her own guinea pig. And I loved how she put that. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but basically all of the tips that I give people to manage their mindset around social media and set social media boundaries and reclaim their time and energy all come from my having to do it from myself, from my having to say, like, if I'm going to have a career in this field, and I'm not just going to go back to square one and like say, what do I want to be when I grow up? I'm going to have to change the way that I think about these platforms. So, everything that I'm telling my clients, I have tested out myself.
Totally, totally. Well, I think for so many coaches, that is the case that like
Yeah.
your dream clients are like a past version of yourself, and you're like, believe me, I've been in it, and and here's all the things that I tried and the things that worked the best and the fastest to help me get out of it.
Definitely.
Um, oh, that's so cool. I love that you were your own guinea pig. Well, I'd love to hear, and I know this is kind of a big question. You've alluded to some of this, but what would you say your philosophy about social media is? I know this is kind of a heady question, but I'm so curious.
Yeah. So I will be the first to say that social media is problematic, right? This actually, like, okay, so it's Wednesday, March 2nd as we're talking, and in the State of the Union address last night, Biden President Biden talked about, the need to hold social media companies, more accountable. So, I think my philosophy is around a lot saying, like, yes, there are problems with these platforms, but acknowledging, like, they're not going to go away. As a business owner, you are going to use them. I mean, if you choose not to, that's totally fine. That just means you need to work way harder in a lot of other areas to market your business. So, saying, yes, this is not a perfect situation, but, how do we make the best of that? And within that, coming back to how social media can be a positive force. And for me, it's a few things. I do think that social media can be, I call it the four C's: creativity, community, cash, and causes you care about are all
Ooh, I
things that
love
you can
that.
get. All things you can get from social media, right? It truly can be a creative outlet, right? 20, 30 years ago, if you had a big idea you wanted to share with the world, you had to start a blog or pitch an op-ed. Social media is a lot more accessible in that way. I think lower barrier to entry. Connection and community. It really truly is a place where you can meet clients, customers, collaborators, colleagues, friends. I have met all of those types of people through social media, people that I never would have met otherwise. Cash, like, yes, we are here to sell stuff and make a living and support ourselves and our families if we have families, and be able to give back in ways that we want. And social media is a super important marketing tool. And yeah, the cause piece. I mean, I think I've, already alluded to how you really can use social media to raise awareness about, issues in the world that matter to you, and be a positive voice for change.
I love that. The 4 C's. I'm gonna remember that. I think that's a really beautiful way of like bucketing, the ways that social media can serve us, and also acknowledging the inherent like problematic nature of some of these platforms. Well, I'd love to hear like who would you say your dream clients are from a content strategy and coaching perspective?
Absolutely.
Who do you work with?
I work with, I mean, kind of a range. And I think that the thing that they all have in common is, it comes back to, like I said, like, you know, they need a tool to make money, but they also want a tool for, creative expression and for supporting causes they care about. So, for me, that is, I work with nonprofits, I work with B Corps and mission driven brands. They can be for profit brands, but with some kind of social impact or focus or charitable component. And I work with a whole array of mission driven solopreneurs. A lot of my clients, either on the, brand side or the solopreneur side, are in some way involved in mental health and wellness, diversity, equity and inclusion, sustainability, education, supporting kids and families. But, I think you and I have talked about this before. The term mission driven, we say that a lot, and it's hard to know what it means, but I think, when you talk to a truly mission driven business owner and you kind of feel it in your bones when that person is really excited about making change in the world and has a business for, as part of being a voice for a movement and not just to make money. So, I work with people who, are designers and strategists who their business necessarily isn't, inherently focused on like driving donations for a cause, but they themselves, want to build a social media presence that's more inclusive, or they want to have a voice about things going on in the world. And, that's a big part of their business and the support that they provide.
Totally, totally. I love that. That makes so much sense. I'm also curious, like when you think about actually using social media for good, like how, like kind of getting down to like the brass tacks of what that looks like. I hate that expression, brass tacks. I don't know where it came from. Um, like who needs brass when you have gold? But, but like, what does it look like to use social media for social good? For anyone who's like, give me like the how to.
Yeah, I think there are a few different pieces of that. Sort of for me, three cornerstones of, how I approach that with my clients. So one is thinking about how can you make your social media presence more inclusive. And I will say I am not an expert on diversity and equity inclusion. It's certainly something I have invested in learning more about to make my own brand more inclusive and to help my clients do the same. If anyone is interested in that work, I would highly recommend Crystal Whitaker, who I actually went through her empowered branding program to learn more about inclusive branding. But, it basically comes back to thinking about, how can you make sure that all people, regardless of their identity, regardless of race, gender, if they have a disability, feel welcomed in by your content, feel that your content is accessible, and ultimately feel like, you know, they can trust you and be part of your community and work with you. So, part of it is thinking about how can you create an inclusive presence and uplift voices of all different backgrounds in the content that you create. I think part of it is, is there an issue that you're really passionate about that you can devote, a fraction of your content to, right? Obviously, you are here to run a business and promote your offers, but um, there's so much research on how supporting social good is actually helpful for sales, right? Aside from the fact that, like, I think if you have a platform, you have the opportunity to support issues like environmentalism, like anti-racism. We're seeing so much research that this generation of consumers doesn't want to buy from brands unless they take a stand on social issues, and they don't even believe that a brand or business has taken a stand unless they've done it on social media specifically, right? So if you have an
Mm,
anti-racist pledge on your website, but you're not, you know, talking about those issues at all on your Instagram page, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So,
mm-hmm.
how can you go back to your mission and what is really important and compelling to you and to your audience? And how can you use some of your content to speak to things you and your audience cares about, like mental health, you know, like environmentalism, like anti-racism, those kinds of things. Um, and I would say another part of it is being thoughtful and sensitive to what is going on in the world. And we have had in the past 2 years, endless examples of really difficult news breaking that take over social media, and business owners I find often feel really confused about, like, do I talk about this, do I not? If I talk about it, am I going to say the wrong thing? Am I adding to the noise, but I should say something because this is important? Or is it okay for me to still sell my services? And yeah, again, I mean, Wednesday, March 2nd, we're talking about this, less than a week um, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So I think, and I want to say there is it's a very complicated question of, how as a business owner, as a small business owner, you show up on social media when terrible things are going on in the world. And I don't think there is a one size fit all solution. And it's going to depend on you, your business, your emotional state, and what your community needs. But I think taking a step back and being thoughtful about, how you can support your social community in those moments. Maybe it is sharing news resources, maybe it is uplifting marginalized voices. Maybe it's just taking a step back and acknowledging, okay, this thing happened, it's terrible, I want to check in with you and see how you're feeling, what kind of content do you need from me. There are a number of ways to manage it that, doesn't mean that you suddenly have to be, if you're not a policy expert, that you have to dissect everything. But I think just sort of taking a pause, taking a breath, and thinking about, what makes sense for you in you and your business and your community in those moments is a way to, kind of lend support at difficult times.
Totally, totally. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And part of me is like, oh my gosh, as someone who has been a small business owner for the past 2 years, I'm like, when has there been a moment in the past 2 years that there hasn't been something terrible
Yeah.
happening in the world? It's and like part of me is like, wow, what was it like? I mean, has it always been like this, or what was it like in a different time? To think about how we show up. I don't know the answer to that, but
I
I'm
think there have been always terrible things going on in the world at all times. Just like on the flip side, there are always, like Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers. There are always people helping, and there is always beautiful art. And there, I think, are always, sources of hope. I think we're just more like, it's in our faces more all the time because of television and digital news outlets and social media. So, this is also a time, in these moments is a time when having boundaries with social media is really important, so you can protect your energy to, show up on social media in a way that's positive, and also, take care of yourself and serve your clients.
totally, totally. I think that's such a great point. And I'm such an advocate for like news boundaries. Like for a while, a few years ago, like I was just like, yep, I will read one piece of news every morning. It was like often the Skim or the New York Times. And it was like, and then if anything else happens the rest of the day, I'll find out about it tomorrow, but I can only take one dose. Um,
Yep.
I'm cu- I'm curious, like, what would be your top recommendations for people who are looking to implement social media boundaries right now?
So there are a lot of different tactics that I work on with my clients, and it depends, what your triggers and your struggles are. But, one thing that seems to work pretty well for most people uh is setting up what I like to call social media free zones. Um, and that is basically picking a time in your week or in the day, and a physical space where you spend significant time, and deciding that you are not going to go on social media in that time or that space. So some examples could be, you could say, I don't want to be on social media for the first hour after I wake up, or I don't want to be on social media, for an hour, for the hour before I go to bed, or I don't want to be on social media at my dinner table. That would be a physical space. Or, I don't want to be on social media in the TV room, because if I'm there, I'm there to watch TV and not simultaneously scroll. Right. And I think, there are all sorts of things we can do. We can set limits in the app, we can set timers on our phone, and that's great. But I think, you know, this is like a little bit more holistic. Instead of like micromanaging the amount of time you spend on social media, it's more like carving out spaces in your life where you know that you will feel better and be more focused and more present if social media is not part of that experience. And then it's kind of like habit stacking, right? You're already
Hmm.
having mornings, you're already having evenings, you're already sitting at the dining room table. Um, so then you're just saying, okay, the habit that I'm layering on top of that is being social media free. And I find that, helps a lot of people, a lot of my clients really, reclaim time, but more just importantly, energy and focus, and, have be alone with their own thoughts or be more present with their friends, their partners, their families, when they need to be.
Totally, totally. I love that. And I guess also for people who have like already kind of gone over the edge, the metaphorical edge, and are just feeling super, super burnt out on social media, what advice would you have for like how to kind of like pull yourself back to a healthier relationship with social?
Definitely, that's a really good question, and believe me, I have been there. um I think, if you're up for it, a hard reset can be helpful, which means, just um
Have you tried
whatever.
turning it off and turning it back on again? Like,
No, I mean like deciding, I'm taking a week off social media and deleting the apps from your phone. And if
totally.
you're a business owner, like I think people worry about doing this because like, oh, my community expects me to show up. You can tell them. You can 100% say like, I am taking a vacation or I am taking a break from social media. I'll be back on this date. Like I'll get back to your questions then. You can even set through I think through Facebook Creator Studio, you can set like automatic out of office replies to DMs. So,
Oh,
giving
cool.
yourself some time to like just clear it out of your system and see like what do I feel like when I'm not on social media. And the goal of that is not to say, oh, I feel amazing, I don't want to be on these apps anymore. It's sort of just like to clear your head a little bit. And I think you'll be surprised that when you come back from a break, even if it's just a break over the weekends, you'll have a lot more creativity, you'll have a lot more energy to engage on the app, and you'll be more excited about it and it will feel better. So I think doing that hard reset and then kind of asking yourself some questions, like asking yourself, what frustrates me about social media the most? Like what is making this a bad experience for me? And maybe it's the mindless scrolling, maybe it's the toxic comparison to other business owners, like identifying that and trying to be mindful of that. And then on the flip side saying, well, what do I actually like about social media? Right?
Hmm.
Most of us can find something that we like about it, whether it's you know the creative outlet or the opportunity to connect, or even just like the funny memes that give us a laugh when we're down. It's not the same for everyone, but most people who are on social media, I find, will find something that they like. So,
Totally. And it
yeah,
is, I think, just a matter of like curating your feed to be the things that you like and that inspire you and bring you joy and not the things that send you into like a spiral.
absolutely. I mean, there's a whole lot, we could talk about in terms of how to control what you're seeing, and we could do a whole podcast on that. But, just reminding yourself, like, you do have control. You choose, who you follow, and it is totally within your right to mute or unfollow any accounts that are bothering you for any reason. Like, you do not, you know, you don't do not owe that an account a follow, like even if it's your best friend. You can connect with them in real life.
Totally, totally. I appreciate that. And yeah, yeah, I feel like the hard reset, it is like so effective, I think, for burnout in a like for so many different kinds of burnout. Like sometimes you really do, like I was joking, but like sometimes you really do need to turn it off and then turn it back on
Yeah,
again. And I think the other thing is like we think that people are paying attention, and sometimes they are, but sometimes they honestly don't even notice. Like honestly, I feel like I had a moment toward the end of last year for various reasons. I was just like, you know what? This just needs to stop for like 10 days. And I
yeah.
truly do not think anyone noticed. And it's
I
fine.
think
That's a good thing. Like, people are living
people
their
don't notice as
lives.
much as they think, or they might just say, "Oh, that's interesting. Liz hasn't been on social media for a while. Like, I'll look forward to her next post when she's back," you know?
Yeah,
I
totally.
also think, even so, just like telling your audience and giving them a heads up, you can't go wrong with that. And it's kind of like it's a way to kind of remind them of your values. Like, most of us mission driven business owners decided to start our own businesses because we valued having control over our time and energy, and we valued rest and joy and play, and we want our clients to have those same things. So, the people who are really a good fit to work with you are, if you say, I'm taking some time off social media to like recharge and tap into my creativity and spend time with my family, like, if anything, that's just going to make them want to work with you more.
Totally, totally. Um, and I have one other like social media related question, and then I want to ask you a few kind of like get to know you, like quick hit
Sure.
questions. And I'm going off script a little bit with this one, but I have found, I will say for myself, and I know for a number of the women that I've worked with who like have wanted to show up more as thought leaders, that like the consistency piece can be really challenging. It's like we have like the best ideas and the best plans, and then either finding time to actually execute it, or like show, we can have everything written out, but then actually posting it or showing up for ourselves can be really challenging. And I'm curious like what tips and tricks you have for maintaining that consistency and how we show up.
Yeah. So, the first thing is, really getting honest with yourself and setting realistic goals, right? And I'm sure, many of my clients, as I'm sure, many of your clients are overachievers, have a lot of, that A plus student energy. And we want to be doing Instagram and LinkedIn and all the platforms to the max. So, thinking about what you can realistically handle, right? There is no perfect number of posts. We can look at some data that shows, if you post as many times, you're going to get more engagement, or if you post as many times, you're maybe going to grow your followers faster. But the perfect number of posts per week is the one that you can realistically maintain without burning yourself out and without dropping the ball on, other parts of your business and other responsibilities you have, to yourself, to your family as a human being, right? So setting those realistic goals, and sometimes those numbers are not as high as we would like them to be, but like it's okay to start with posting less and get comfortable and work your way up from there. So, I think that's one piece. And then, also just understanding that life happens and you're not always going to be able to stick with your posting goals, but, asking yourself, okay, I don't have time to post to my feed 3 times this week like I wanted to, but like, what can't, I'm talking about Instagram specifically because that's probably, where most of your clients are, but what can I do? Like, can I, just show up in stories because that feels like less pressure to me? Like, maybe I don't have the energy to talk to camera in stories, so can I just like take a picture and add some text over it, sharing some tips or checking in with my audience? Like, there's so many ways to show up on these different platforms, and it doesn't have to be like all of the things all of the time. So, instead of having a week where, you're doing a million posts and reels and stories, and then you're burning yourself out and you're totally quiet, saying, okay, well, I can't do the perfect image of what I thought I wanted, but how can I still show up and still connect with my audience given the time and energy that I have right now?
Totally, totally. I appreciate that. Like, how can I do this in a personally sustainable way? And I think one thing I've been having a conversation with a lot of my entrepreneur friends in particular about is like, how can we just like dial the ambition back? Because like
Yep.
it's there, and it's not always in our best interest to be like full on.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. I think and some of it, like, we have to ask, where those ambitions are. Is that an ambition that you really have, or do you have that ambition because, like, you're comparing yourself to someone else? I had this with a client last year who, like, insisted on posting 7 days a week, even though I told her, like, max 5, and I honestly would have been happy with her doing 3. And she kept insisting on that, and she was too busy, um and she couldn't do it, and then when it didn't happen, she would be really hard on herself. And I asked her where this was coming from, this expectation, and it turned out, a brand that she really admired was posting 7 days a week. So we saw they had over 400,000 followers. We looked at their LinkedIn profile and saw that they had a team of 35. Meanwhile, she was a solopreneur who had a different full-time job and was also getting a master's degree.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
it's just apples and orange. And once we looked at, okay, well, this company is able to do this because they probably have 3 different people working on their social media, whereas, like, you only have, like, a fraction of yourself to work on social media. Then she was like, okay, I'm just going to post, like, 3 times a week, and I'm going to feel really good about that. And she actually started posting way more consistently because she was just realistic and, like, took the pressure off herself.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that you did that digging because, yeah, I can totally see how it's like, oh, well, I want to be like them. So, like, of course, this is the standard, but it's like, okay, well, what's driving that belief? And, like,
Well,
you're
I'm
not
sure,
three
as
people.
a coach, like, that question comes. My coaches ask me that, like, okay, you have this opinion, or you have this thought, or this worry, like, where is this coming from? Whose voice is that really?
Totally. But I think so
Is it
many of,
yours?
right. But so often we're like running these scripts in our heads, or we like we get these ideas in our heads. We didn't like choose the idea, we didn't choose the thought, but it's in there.
Yeah.
Sometimes all it takes is someone asking a question about where it came from for you to be like, huh, I did not pick that. It could actually
Yeah.
go. Well, I'm so glad. I'm sure your clients are also so glad that they have you to help kind of reset and reframe. And I'm curious, I know we talked a little bit about like your past self, and obviously your journey to get here. And one of my favorite things I love asking um women in general is like, if you could give some advice to your past self, and you can pick an age or moment as you see fit, or it can be totally like general, what advice do you wish you had figured out a little, or like, what do you wish you had figured out a little bit sooner?
I wish that I could tell many stages of my former self. And I'm sure my future self will tell my now self this, like, sort of like, just relax, it's going to happen.
Mm,
I think for, like, I was that A plus overachiever, and I think, there were, like, so many things in my personal life and my career that was so worried would never happen. And I think about, you know for various reasons, like, how really unhappy and lost I felt in my career for a very long time. And I remember, like, separately, having very deep conversations with a couple really good friends, and, like, you know, in very disparate conversations. It's not like I sat down and, like, wrote a, like, cosmic shopping list of what I wanted in a job. But I remember saying things like, I just wish that I had one of those jobs where I could network all the time. I wish I could do public speaking. I wish that I got to write in my own voice. I wish that I got to support many different important missions instead of having to choose one. And none of those things actually had anything to do with why I decided to start my own business. But, I remember being 6 to 9 months into my business. I'm just over just a couple weeks over the 1 year mark now. But, you know,
congrats.
thank you.
You're welcome. That's
But looking
huge.
back and sort of realizing, like, that my business allowed me to do every single one of those things that I said that I had wanted, where I thought there was no job that would possibly allow me to do all of those things, and maybe not even any of those things. So I think maybe this is a very long-winded way of coming back to self-trust, but I think, there are like a lot of I talked at the beginning about how I feel like my career path was like very circuitous, but I think, a lot of the times, like, if you are a smart, capable, determined person, you will get yourself there. And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to like have it worked out in the moment. And I think sort of just trusting that, you know, things can happen a little bit
Totally.
more. And Cleo Wade actually has a really in her book of poems and like short essays has a really good quote about I'm not going to be able to remember it word for word, but it's something about how like if you believe that you're going to make it happen, you will that's not that belief is not only like going to make it more likely that it will happen, it's also going to help you enjoy the process of getting there. So I think it's like, how
Mm.
can we enjoy the process of getting to our goals and not, wait until we've achieved them to be happy?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I feel like there were so many like nuggets in there. Like one, relax, it'll happen. It's just like such brilliant advice and I just could not agree more. That's like if we are suffering in pursuit of a goal, like maybe it's not the right goal. Right?
Right.
How can we make like the every step along the process of achieving the goal like as
Right.
enjoyable as it can possibly be, because that way whether you get there or not, you've had a good time along the way.
Yes. I think it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. Everyone's like, when am I going to get to my 10K months? And like, if I don't hit $100,000 in my first 6 figures in my first year, like, and it's sort of like, it's a process.
Well, totally. And I mean, it doesn't help, right? That like I feel like there's so many like vanity metrics that people do talk
Yeah.
about in their business success and they're cool, right? Like when you have having those moments is really cool. It's also like I'm not like there is some very creative math that I think happens in how people
Hmm.
calculate and share those moments, right? Like there is no like standard for like when you've actually hit a 10K month or when you've actually had a like is it 6K in revenue or not 6K 6 figures in revenue, is it 6 figures of paying yourself, like it's all very
Right.
murky.
Did you sign a 10K contract, but you only got a $2,500 deposit? Like,
Yeah, and are you gonna count it? Like, I mean, I'm here for counting it, whatever it is. Like, celebrate it, count it. But yeah, I think it can be so easy to feel like you're behind when you're looking at people like sharing those shiny moments. And the like, I think, imagine just like on social, like the sustained, consistent growth is not sexy, but it is
yeah.
like so much more sustainable, I think.
Social
And
media is a long game. I know no one likes to hear that, but I think we want the immediate payoff from every post, and we think it's like I post this thing and someone clicks the link in the bio and they buy from me and now I've hit my revenue goal, and that's not really how it works. It's much more like they see this thing, they see another thing, you chat in the DMs, they come to your masterclass, they see another post, you keep showing up with stuff that stuff they find helpful, you stay top of mind for them, and like eventually they sign up to work with you. I wish it was the faster way, but it's just that's not how marketing is, unfortunately.
totally, totally. And I think it like goes back to the idea and Melanie Auber, one of my marketing coaches, and I think I actually talked about this on a recent podcast episode. It's like you just have to you're always planting seeds and you just have to trust that they are going to sprout, but like we don't have control over
Yes.
you can water them and you can
Yeah.
plant them, but like they're going to sprout when they sprout.
The business coach I'm working with now, Jess Joswick, she says plant the seeds, but then don't wait and watch. Like you don't have to stand there waiting for them to grow beneath your eyes. And she also says marketing is not a vending machine, which I love.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, I was actually going to ask, one of the things I love talking about on the podcast, I'm manifesting this, putting it out into the universe that one day I'm going to print like decks of inspirational post-its with all my favorite like messages from guests on the show. And so if you got an inspirational post-it, you can totally, I mean, I feel you've already dropped some pearls of wisdom in our conversation, but if you got an inspirational post-it for women changing the world all over the world to like stick on their laptops to remind themselves of something, what phrase would you want to put on it?
This is a quote from Toni Morrison, and it's, "If you want to fly, you got to give up the shit that weighs you down." And I've loved that for a long time, since before I was an entrepreneur, because, I'm someone who's at times a little neurotic and can get like, very caught up in my head worrying about things that like ultimately are not super important. So I think it's, important from kind of a mental health perspective, but, also as an entrepreneur, like, we have to do everything and we can't. So I think about that in terms of, what's in your business that you don't like doing that's weighing you down, that, you can get support with. Like, it's okay to delegate, it's okay to hire a coach. And then, also like the perfectionism, the constantly just wanting to like optimize every piece. Like, how can you let go of some of that? Because, I think we all want to do an A+ job on everything we do. And when you're an entrepreneur, you absolutely can't do that. Like, it's not sustainable. So, letting go, letting, the messy action, letting imperfect things out into the world. And, I think that's the shit that weighs us down as entrepreneurs, is the needing everything to be A+ all the time when it should be like B- at best.
Totally. I love that so much. I think that's such a brilliant quote and such a helpful reminder. And this has been so much fun. It's been so fun to talk to you about all things social, both I guess social media and social impact and social good. I feel like I've got a lot of food for thought from our conversation. And would love to know, for people who want to find more info about like working with you or follow along with all your
Yeah.
brilliant tips and tricks, like what's the best place for people to connect with you?
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for having me, Liz. I have enjoyed it so much. I always love talking with you. So, a few places to find me. I am most active on Instagram at Nina Stoller Lindsay, NinaStollerLindSey. I'm sure you'll link this in the show notes too.
Totally.
I am also on LinkedIn for those who like to consume content there. And then I have an email newsletter where I share, even in more in depth social media strategy advice and social media mindset and boundary tips. Then I can get into on social media, and, my email subscribers also get, a little bit more about the behind the scenes of my business, and are the first to know about new programs. I have something new and exciting cooking for later this spring.
Ooh.
So yeah, so you can get on my email list now to be one of the first to know.
Amazing. I love it. I cannot wait to see what you are cooking up right now. And thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. It has been just so much fun to chat with you.
It has been so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the Women Changing the World podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is liz.best, that's lis.best, or you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, Liz Best. Join my mail list by visiting elizabethbest.com/monthly meditation, and you'll receive all the latest updates on events, retreats, and opportunities to work with me, plus a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next episode.